British Airways First Class can cost thousands of pounds for the privilege. This should be a fairy tale journey to New York, one of aviation's most storied routes, exclusive lounge and a private suite at 35,000 feet. So why did it feel like I was invisible at times? I've flown first class dozens of times. I know what great looks like. I know what forgettable looks like. This one gave me both, and it left me rather miffed. Let's start where BA genuinely gets it right. Terminal 5 at Heathrow. I arrived at 1:20 PM, 3 hours early, and went straight to the far right of the terminal, the first wing. BA's private check-in enclave, first class and select status holders only. Check-in was fast and frictionless. Private security follows. And I'll say it plainly, this is one of the smoothest security experiences in the world. Calm, efficient, no theatre. If only the rest of the trip scaled the same way. From security, you walk into the gallery's first lounge, greeted by Susan, BA's resident horse sculpture, and then left into the Concorde Room itself. This is one of the most exclusive lounges on the planet. You need a first-class boarding pass or a Concorde Room card requiring 65,000 qualifying tier points, roughly £80,000 of annual spend with BA. The bar is set high before you even walk in, and the first impression delivers. Dimly lit chandeliers, fresh flowers, wooden floors giving way to soft carpeting, a sleek bar and semi-private dining booths. There's a terrace overlooking the apron with proper plane spotting views, and this is exactly where I headed. Here full a la carte service means you're seated and waited on. For aviation enthusiasts, there's the centerpiece. A 13-foot section of a real Concorde nose cone, an aircraft that flew 17 million miles across the Atlantic. On the terrace, pride of place, I sat right next to it, obviously. I started with the Cuvée Louise 2006. Pommery's Prestige Cuvée. This was served in a wine glass, for reasons unknown. We'll move on. Here was the menu for the day. To start, a smoked salmon with pickled beetroot puree, sour cream, caviar and chive. Beautifully presented, generous salmon, and that caviar was a genuinely elegant touch. Second starter, Somerset cured duck, melon and rocket. The duck was notably chewy. For the main, Cornish pie. Silky, well-flavoured, good texture from the crust. Comforting rather than fine dining. This was a solid lounge lunch, and then some time to enjoy those views too. I enjoyed some afternoon tea on the terrace. Scones, jam, clotted cream, sandwiches, cakes, actual tea, and yes, more champagne naturally. After lunch, I had time to enjoy a drink, but first here's a highlights of other spots in the lounge you can relax in. There are several living areas with different characters, whatever takes your fancy. They still have the cabanas here, which itself is rather drab, much like the restroom facilities. At the bar, there's another piece of history worth knowing about. The Gordon's Tree Bell. Originally used at British Airways Sudan Flying Boat Base in Khartoum, this bell was later rung to mark the merger of BEA and BOAC, the moment British Airways as we know it was born. Today, staff ring it to mark the first and last departures of the day. Part of me wants to book the last flight of the day just to hear it ring. It was time to board, but here's the thing, this lounge is being outpaced by business class lounges, not first. Now boarding first class is something many airlines still struggle with. Lufthansa and Air France do it properly, escorting you directly from the lounge to the aircraft, making you feel like a genuine VIP. British Airways, not so much. Luckily, I avoided the usual gate-side chaos by arriving fashionably late. As is customary, I was escorted from the aircraft door to my suite. A journey of approximately 5 steps, grueling stuff. British Airways now has a fairly consistent first-class product across the 777 fleet. 8 suites, spread across 2 rows. Our aircraft today was a 14-year-old 777, retrofitted with BA's latest first cabin, good bones. At first glance, the cabin actually looked fresh and inviting. The flight was fully booked in first, with all but one passenger already on board. And then, things started going sideways. The crew came by and asked what I'd like to drink. They also asked if I wanted pyjamas and slippers. Those PJs didn't arrive until halfway through the flight. But this was just the beginning of what's to come. As I settled into the seat, I noticed the remote was sticky. On closer inspection, it appeared to be stained with what looked like red wine, almost certainly from the previous passenger. I flagged this to the crew and asked for some wet wipes. Around this time, the cabin service manager, Emma, introduced herself and welcomed me on board. 6 or 7 minutes later, my champagne finally arrived, along with the pre-departure canapés, just as the aircraft door closed.
Safety and security is top priority at British Airways, so 2 minutes on safety. Firstly, today's flight is the most smoking flight. Smoking is prohibited at all times whilst you're on board.
Block any aisles or exits.
Just a moment. Please check your seatbelt is fastened securely and worn whenever the seatbelt signs are on. It is fastened like this, adjusted like this.
Remove the jacket from its container and pull it over your head. Pass the long strap around your waist. Secure the clip to the buckle and pull tight. To inflate, pull the red toggle as shown, and the air can be topped up by using this mouthpiece. There is a light for attracting attention. Please.
And as we began taxiing, I noticed something else missing: bottled water. Normally BA places a bottle at every first seat, not today. It took 25 minutes after takeoff for the wet wipes to finally appear, accompanied by a faint apology that they had been misplaced. A promising start, truly. Given the 4:30 PM departure and the lunch I'd just had in the Concorde Room, I opted to dine about 2 hours after takeoff. In the meantime, snacks and champagne were offered. BA was serving 2 champagnes on this flight: Veuve Clicquot Le Grand Dame 2015, which was excellent, and Piper Heidsieck Rosé Brut. But what surprised me most during this period was something else entirely. Nearly 2 hours passed with zero interaction from the crew. None. The dining menu was as follows. Dinner eventually began at 6:50 PM UK time, about 20 minutes later than I'd asked, and from here, service moved at an almost glacial pace. The meal began with an amuse-bouche. Then, service essentially ground to a halt. The crew member serving my side simply disappeared. I could hear the bustle in the galley, but my sweet corners was a desert. The cabin service manager did come by and offer bread twice, but 20 minutes passed before the starter arrived. Truffled Cornish chicken and leek terrine. I wasn't sure what to make of it, didn't love it, didn't hate it. For the main course, I went with the Welsh lamb rack and slow braised shoulder. The shoulder was lovely, the rest, forgettable. And halfway through the meal, I realised something else was missing: Yorkshire pudding. It was on the menu, nowhere on the plate. But the biggest issue wasn't the food. From table set to the end of the main course, I was never offered water, not once. Eventually I had to ask for it. When I finished, again, no top-ups were offered, so I just requested a bottle. Here's what the drinks menu looked like. For dessert, I chose the warm crepes, Suzette, And to be fair, this was genuinely good. Perhaps a little heavier than expected, which meant I skipped the cheese course entirely. Overall, the meal itself was decent, but the service surrounding it was deeply unimpressive. Whether it was inexperience or indifference, I genuinely couldn't tell. But then a shift. The purser stepped in for the turn-down service, and suddenly the burst I know returned. I took a moment to visit the first-class lavatory and get comfortable in the PJs I just received. These 777-1s are spacious, well-appointed, and a massive step up from the cramped 787 bathrooms. Back to my suite, the turn-down was handled with proper flair. The BA First bed remains, in my view, among the very best in the sky. Wide, flat, supremely comfortable, the kind of bed that makes you forget the hiccups. The bedding provided is plush, certainly a step up in luxury from business class. And with the doors closed, it felt like a perfect cocoon to drift into sleep. I managed about a 90-minute nap. About an hour before landing, Emma, the CSM, noticed I was awake and asked if I'd like anything. I wasn't particularly hungry, and even if I had been, the Light Bites menu was identical to several other recent BA First flights. A slight sense of déjà vu. The famous fish butty was there again. Very British, I know. So instead, I opted for popcorn and decided to watch a couple of episodes of something. For references, here is what some of these meals looked like on a different BA First Class flight last year. And the last hour in the suite was actually quite pleasant, almost like relaxing at home, except of course with views of the sky, which is infinitely better. This wasn't a bad flight, but for first class, it was deeply underwhelming. The hard product is strong, excellent suite and bed, always a great first wing experience, and when redeemed with points and a companion voucher, the value is still defensible. Otherwise, for a product at this price point, the service failed in the ways that matter. Not spectacularly, but consistently. A distinct lack of focus or attention for large parts of the flight. A crew member who seemed to check out mid-flight. Small things, but in first class, small things are the whole point. The cabin service manager clearly noticed and quietly intervened where she could. BA First doesn't need theatrics, it just needs consistency, attention to detail, and a little pride in the product. On this flight, those things were largely missing. If you enjoyed this video, please remember to subscribe, it would help out a lot. Thank you for watching, till next time, happy flying.